You are now watching The Beach.
After watching last week's Nintendo Direct, I noticed something a bit unusual. Nintendo made a huge deal about Earthbound coming to Nintendo Switch Online. Don't get me wrong, Earthbound is a great game, but it was weird seeing Earthbound essentially being treated like a new game. They did this nearly a decade ago with the Wii U, but it made sense then. When Earthbound was announced to be coming to the Wii U, it was a big deal considering the game wasn't re-released priorly, and Earthbound Beginnings was essentially a new game considering it didn't get a worldwide release. Though if anything, I'm honestly still baffled that Mother 3 hasn't seen a localization, considering Nintendo is well aware of the high demand for it, but after hearing some recent news, the extravagant Earthbound reveal makes sense now. And not for a good reason. Nintendo has announced that the 3DS and Wii U eShops will be shutting their doors in March of 2023. Unfortunately, I saw this coming, but it does bring up a good discussion. You may have noticed that I have posted many critical videos about Nintendo, especially within the past week. Contrary to popular belief, I don't hate Nintendo. I love Nintendo and I want to see them improve, and I don't hold back any punches, because in the Demich house, we don't have to wait for a quote-unquote free update to let us enjoy boxing. It's the year 2022, the 3DS and Wii U have been discontinued for quite some time now. Some may think it's not a big deal shutting down the eShops. After all, why would you need a 3DS or Wii U when the greatest console of all time has Kablooey and Atari 5200 controllers? I'll tell you why. Not only can you experience the great games made for the 3DS and Wii U, but they're the only ways you can play Nintendo's treasure trove of legacy content officially. One of the things that made the Wii great is the Virtual Console. This allowed players to purchase retro games. 2010 is when I fell in love with the Mario series, and I wanted to experience the entire history of the series. I will never forget how exciting it was to play the Super Mario Bros. Trilogy for the very first time, and the best thing was, I didn't even need to get another system. I experienced most of Nintendo's classic games thanks to the Virtual Console, and thankfully, the Virtual Console returned on the 3DS and the Wii U. The Virtual Console and the 3DS focused more on handheld games such as the Game Boy games. There were even a few Sega Game Gear games, which was very cool. Unfortunately though, there weren't Game Boy Advance games, but fortunately, the Wii U had them. In fact, the Wii U Virtual Console offered games from almost all Nintendo's consoles, oddly enough not the GameCube, and unsurprisingly, the Virtual Boy. You even had DS games, which was awesome. The best thing about the Virtual Console was easy access to retro games, and how they essentially made consoles into an all-in-one system. The prices for the games were very reasonable too. But then we get to the Switch. Nintendo has been absolutely awful when it comes to providing legacy content on the Switch. You would think putting the Virtual Console on the most popular system would be a no-brainer, but for some unexplained reason, Nintendo refuses to let players have access to legacy content. What have we gotten? We were drip-fed NES and SNES games, and when we did get them, we got games like Kablooey and Jelly Boy. Now we have Nintendo 64 games on the Switch, but they're part of the garbage online expansion pack. As if that wasn't enough, the Nintendo 64 games don't even work properly oftentimes. Paper Mario actually has a game-breaking bug that can delete your save. The only good thing Nintendo has done on the Switch when it comes to legacy content is finally making their arcade classics available in all their original glory. The main problem with Nintendo shutting down the 3DS and Wii U eShop is that fans will not have easy access to not just legacy content, but games made for the 3DS and Wii U. This means that if you want a game, you're gonna have to track down a physical copy. Considering how expensive retro games have become, that's a huge problem. Not only that, the 3DS and Wii U also had many smaller eShop games. Things like Pushmo, Rusty's Real Deal Baseball, the Mario vs. Donkey Kong games, and of course Dr. Luigi. This wouldn't be a major issue if Nintendo would just make all the games available on a current platform. But they don't. But why is that? Here's my theory. Nintendo knows how much fans want legacy content. They also know how much Virtual Console games were. Wii games were the most expensive, costing $20. What they like to do now is find sneaky ways to give fans legacy content at full price. Super Mario 3D All-Stars has 3 games in one. These are games people really wanted to play, but let's say you just wanted to play Super Mario Sunshine. Too bad, it's all or none. Skyward Sword HD is another example. It has a few quality of life improvements, but it's grossly overpriced for what it is. And if you want to play Nintendo 64 games, you better fork out $50 a year for the expansion pack. The end of the 3DS and Wii U eShop can go one of two ways. Option number 1, Nintendo can provide players a way to play retro games on current hardware. Option number 2, and what's probably gonna happen, they'll get mad at players for emulating games that they don't even sell anymore. Nintendo is the only company that not only goes after emulation in full force, but doesn't even provide players the option to play most of their legacy content. Some Nintendo shills say emulation is piracy, but what is there to pirate? Regardless if someone emulates a game or buys it secondhand, Nintendo is not making any profit. I hope Nintendo gets the message that fans want legacy content and either keep the 3DS and Wii U eShops up, or provide a reasonable alternative. I must admit, it's getting very difficult to like Nintendo. Some perceive me to be too negative. I will say, I can see why some would find the continuous Nintendo rants to be quite jarring, but I want to be as excited about Nintendo as I was in the Wii U era. Great games are still coming. Kirby and the Forgotten Land looks incredible. Mario Strikers Battle League looks very promising. I criticize because I care, but if there's one thing I agree with the Nintendo shills with, it's that fans are entitled, they are, to better products. I'm not gonna sit here and watch Nintendo release a half-assed successor to a game that is so near and dear to my heart and so many others. I'm not going to stay silent about Nintendo continuing to sell faulty controllers. If you disagree with my opinion, no issue whatsoever. I can see why many are excited for the Mario Kart DLC, and I have no issues with disagreements. EB and I have very different opinions about the Patrick Show, but we still had a blast doing the skit for the spin-offs rant. What I have a hard time comprehending is why people make such an effort to defend Nintendo. When I criticize Nintendo, I'm not criticizing you. Nintendo is not your friend. It's a corporation that has some of the best series and games out there, but also some of the most baffling business decisions. Us as consumers keep Nintendo alive and deserve better. So what do you guys think? How do you feel about the 3DS and Wii U eShops closing, and what would be a good alternative? Anyways, thanks for watching, and keep calm and dada on.